on this computer, record. And I was telling them, I think my internet is the same one as last week. So I'm going to turn off my video, but I'm still here. So, okay. I'll let Alejandro take it away.
All right. So welcome to week number 7, I think. Yeah, well, wow. Time flies. All right. So let's see. Today we're having demos, and after that we're having a QA session. So if you haven't, Michael posted a message in Slack, so if you want to read it. So it would be like a technical QA if you want, or more like a career-focused QA. I don't know, like it's up to you. So yeah, anyways, that's it. I think we can start with demos. Who wants to go first?
We can go first.
There you go. All right.
Get it out of the way.
Yeah.
All right. Let me share my screen. Hold on. Okay. So you see, let's go here. All right. So we are gonna go over the pull request first, and then we're gonna dig into our code. So as a user, I want to view details of my purchase to better understand my purchase patterns. That sounds a bit kind of a tongue twister, but what we did, we created an item detail page to display an item name, which also displays the last purchase, estimated number of days until next purchase, number of times it's been purchased, and then let's see, the parts that we included were the ability to create a distinct route. And this is the code description, the ability to create a distinct route for each item, a way to get each item's data, and a page to display the item, and a link to get back to the original list. So basically, when you have the list, you just click on the specific item, and then you'll get I guess you can say it moves to another page, but maybe we should have done a pop-up, would have been cool. But yeah, you get a detailed of that item actually. So the acceptance criteria from the shopping list, the user can tap to navigate to a detailed view of the item. Detailed view includes the following information: name of the item, last purchase date, estimated number of days until the next purchase, and number of times the item has been purchased. So when in the item's detail, yes, and we had to create a back button at the top, a navigation page. So when the item detail view, a back arrow should appear in the header to takes the place of the user back to the list. Takes the user back to the list view. Tongue twister. So yeah, just a navigation feature. Let's see, the updates. This is all the code Alejandro, dag. Nabil will talk about, but I guess you guys can read through it, because Nabil is actually going to talk about that. But this is the actual detailed information of what we did. And we had no before. This is the after, kind of what you will get when you click on it. And this is kind of what it looks like otherwise, and the steps and QA criteria. So we will go to Nabil to go to our code. So
actually, do you want to scroll up just a little bit to go over updates?
Okay.
So yeah. So so one of the issues here was so we have this item detail page that we need to show the details of each individual item. This was a little bit more complicated than just passing params from one component to another, because we had to create individual routes for each item. So the trick there now becomes like, how do we dynamically create an item list, or individual routes per item? And then the second part of that is how do we then know what information to display according to like the item detail component? What we chose to do was to take the document ID from basically from Firebase. So there's a document ID there, and we used it as basically the way to identify what item we're about to display. And so what you can do using a React router is you can actually pull parameters from the matched routes. So in this case, we had list item / document ID. We're not really concerned with any security things in this. So I'm sure we could have, for instance, hashed it first and then had something to decrypt it on the other end. Or I'm sure there's a better way to do that. But in this regard, we actually took the raw identifier from the database and use that as part of the individual links per item. Then we would take that, pass it to the item detail page, and using that, we used this, like we did before with Firestore collection, where we were able to take, I think it's a Firebase React, what is that called? Where you import it, I can't think of it right now. Yeah, so anyways, the Firebase React like library, basically.
The Firestore collection?
Exactly. Well, yeah, so there was Firestore collection. There's actually another one called Firestore document, which allows us to grab a specific document. So by using the path, we were able to pass the document ID, then pull that the document ID and pass it to Firestore document. And that's how we basically created a connection between the link and the item detail page. That's the whole thing. And then, so now I'll just show you the actual demo, but I wanted you to know what to look for. It says, you can now start screen share while the other participant is sharing.
Yeah, I got you.
Do you want, Ken? Awesome, great.
Mm-hmm.
1 second. Great. So this, I'm actually not gonna go over the code just because I kind of detailed that out. But if we look here, so I'm hovering over super strong coffee or onion, and I want you to look at the very bottom left corner. You'll see localhost 3000 / list item /, and then you'll see this long combination of letters. So that's actually the document ID for onion. So when you click it, you're going to be routed to that, and it's going to pull out that specific thing and pass it to item detail component. And that's how it's used to generate this. So it takes the document object, it pulls out each individual item. Obviously, someone pointed this out. So I have messed by hand with each individual document on here. So I actually have a feeling that this is probably me messing with last purchase dates and entering stuff in. It's very possible that it's just actually not this is just pulling directly. So it pulls the date object, and then what it's doing is it's actually going through a formatter. So there's possibility that either the actual date object is wrong because I was messing with it, or that the formatter, although the formatter has been working on the other ones, but that's something I might want to take a look at. But yeah, so it pulls each one of these from the documents. So it's generated dynamically. The link button goes back. I click on tomato, same thing should come here. Now I'm seeing a pattern. So there definitely is probably an issue here, which everyone got the last purchase at like 1950 seems to be a big year. So this is probably actually wrong in terms of the formatter, but I can look at that. But regardless, the actual document is getting passed to the detail pages, and you're seeing this dynamic information per one. So although this is the error, that's the simplest error. This is the best error that I could expect from this whole thing, which is like everything's connected, format it differently. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and that was a part that, yeah, go ahead. That was a part that we kind of did a deep dive on with the wonderful math part of JavaScript. So we were trying to figure out how to best display that. So we went back and forth, but I think we found the best possible way without spending forever and ever doing it. So.
Another way that we could have done this is passed each individual bit of information to the actual path. I don't think that would have scaled very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was another option. This was a fun way to kind of connect everything that we were doing together. I think it's probably less performant because we're issuing another server call. But on like the better hand, if we were passing this out to multiple people, and I just happen to be on that page, and then I click that link because it does check the server and generates that. If there was something being done by another member and I click that, it would actually be represented of that exact second.
Well, great work. Yeah, nice. Congratulations. No, really.
Thank you. Thank you.
On the note of performance, I think it's really easy to get into a rabbit hole of considering performance implications. Sometimes it's best to just let performance become a problem before you address it. I think it depends on the circumstance, of course, but sometimes people over-engineer things for performance, and they spend a lot of time doing that when you can do it quickly and well, and maybe you do an extra query, but in the end, it's fine. So I think you did a good job doing that.
Yeah, and I will say that I'm glad you said that, because that's kind of the fork in the road that we came to. We were like, which way do we want to go? Like, do we want to do this or this? And it was almost like a toss-up. We were like, okay, we're doing this. And yeah, we weren't for sure of how that would affect things. But yeah, we kind of made a quick decision. But I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, the best version of a feature is the done version. I'm saying there, I forget the exact words, but yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
All right.
I completely agree. Yeah. All right. Well,
okay.
Nancy and Megan, you're next.
You want me to just share the screen and yeah, so we don't have a lot of cool things to talk about as far as like demoing code and whatnot, but going down rabbit holes when you have free reign to do whatever you want on design, it can be debilitating, and I think that ended up causing us like taking a lot of time. There's lots of different iterations we went through that we should have taken more screenshots of, but I know Tansy is even wanting to do more, like working on a carousel for different images that we had for background, which is pretty cool. So you could kind of customize your own grocery list. And then of course, when you start doing CSS for one page or doing design, you're kind of affecting everything else. So I broke the nav by removing it and trying to add it where I thought it would be more useful. We sort of talked about how the navigation doesn't make sense on this welcome page since you don't have a list to go to. But I did fix that this morning. I think, again, going down rabbit holes, you can kind of like frustrate yourself by trying too much to get something done and then stepping away and then coming back and be like, oh, that was so easy. Like, I don't know why I was having so many problems earlier, but yeah, so this is kind of what we ended up with. We have a few screenshots in our pull request of different things that we tried. Found some cool color palettes. We were even thinking like retrofuturism, because people are kind of like getting into this concept now of like, what does the future hold when you're in this kind of like apocalyptic pandemic? What does the next step look like? But a lot of those colors ended up being maybe a little too intense for a grocery list. So we went with something more simple and calm. But we also dug down into accessibility features. We can't check the background as of yet because it's not hosted. I did find a tool for testing background images to see if they are accessible as well. but there are a lot of really cool tools for testing color contrast. And I didn't even know that there were that many different types of color blindness. And so one of the tools I added a link to test for different types and what it looks like to each user. I think this one ended up being the most helpful because it gives you the grade along with the percentage of people with different types of vision impairment. So for instance, our color combo, people with cataracts may not be able to see it very well, but so yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, and we included an article of a woman who has written about lots of different tools you can use as well. Yeah,
this is so awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything, Tansy?
No, basically what you said. I think for me and you, like, we had fun kind of with the process because you're like, oh, the world is our oyster. Let's just put virtual reality, a video game, everything. But then
we were gonna add Tansy made a game, and she was talking about, we were gonna like add it to the welcome screen, and then we're like, okay, we're going a little too nuts.
Yeah, because it's like when we actually got to it, it's like being on like a sinking boat. It's like you plug one hole and like another hole pops up. It was like, oh, fixing a button, where did that route go? So we were just like, let's just do what we know. But I would say, like, out of everything, like the process for this, like we had a lot of fun.
Where did you get the background image? Did y'all make it?
No. I mean, I'm not you, Nabil. But like, I basically just pulled it off from like the web.
We did think about Univille a lot. We're like, oh God, he's gonna hate it if we don't have it.
So I don't know when you posted the one with all the varying colors, but that's the only one I saw at first. And I think I audibly like gasped.
I could feel it. I was like, he's gasping.
I was like, and then I think I was like, oh, okay. And I was like talking to my wife and everything, and I was like, yeah, it's cool, like whatever. And then when I saw the updated, I was like, yes, this is great. Yeah, no, it's a whole complicated space. These updates are, I think, like really wonderful. The thoughtfulness that you went into the accessibility, also even just like pulling those two things so you're making like an easy decision in an actionable space right up front is like huge, just because that cuts down on just like the funnel in general of like, oh, I have to click here and I have to come here, like what if I didn't mean to, or it just like cuts down on the cognitive load. I think these are great updates. It was great. It was like the best thing to see the first one and then see the next. I was like, okay, great. This was exciting.
But we were still open to changing it. Like,
yeah. We were hesitant
no.
to post the process ones because of that reason, but I thought it would be good to show like, hey, we tried some different stuff out, and if you like these colors, we can go back or whatever.
No, it's great. The process stuff is like wonderful. Just like then you get to see where you end up, so it's great.
Yeah, we did pull the share code in just because we were like, there's a lot of clicks to get to where you want to go, and the welcome page is just kind of a little boring with just one element anyway. So we're like, what else would we add here? And we still didn't. We were thinking of like copyright stuff, but or just copy, and couldn't come up with anything better. It's like hard to really push like an exciting grocery list.
Yeah.
Well, you did great. Thanks for the link to the accessibility site. I didn't know it, and looks really good. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, like all the PR description, everything is really good. So thank you.
Y'all are doing so well with your PRs that when like I opened them yesterday, I didn't find anything really anything to point out like wrong. So
oh wow,
yeah, you just all the code looks really good. I think y'all are starting to really mesh well together. So I just get to have fun like pointing out all the things I like about the code,
I agree. Well,
yes, this looks fantastic, and you all have been so incredibly thoughtful, and it's been a beautiful way to watch you grow. The end. Sorry, I'm staying muted because there's so many loud babies.
That's fine. All right. Well, that's it for demos. Now, the QA section. So it's up to you.
I love this
Shoot.
because we like have a handful of learning modules that we do every time that we think are super valuable to the Collab Lab and the collaboration experience that you have here. But ideally, we want to give you what is best for you and what you need. And since every cohort is different, that can always be different. So I loved when, was it Michael or Alejandro, one of you brought up doing the QA, and I was like, oh, that's actually a really good idea, a good way to like dig into what you all think you need. So what do you think you need? Let us know.
I put a few like talking points in there that if they're of interest to you, let us know. I think if there's like any technical stuff that you feel like the first time we went over it in the code base, it works, but you're not sure how it works, and you want like more like just discussion around that to learn more about it, we can talk that. Or I'm really interested to understand like more of like what all four of you are going to do after Collab Lab and what your intentions are for working in tech. Because we tried to build, I think, Collab Lab to be a stepping stone into getting a job in tech. So I just assume by default that y'all are thinking about that. So I'm interested to know what's on your mind there, if you want to talk about that or ask questions. So yeah.
I know for me, like I know I've talked to Andrew, and I've definitely talked to Stacy, and even you, I think, a bit. So I think for me, the ball is rolling a bit as far as potential, opportunities and what I want to do. I think I'm just looking for where I can fit, but definitely continuing, definitely want to move into tech. Like this is, I'm hoping that this is a stepping stone. So what position that is, I don't know, but just kind of what I see, and I think what can work for me, at least initially. But I think it's kind of interesting. It feels a bit like you're coming out of high school or college or whatever, and there's just so many possibilities, and you're like, it's like the guidance counselor, like, what do you want to do? Like, I don't know. Like, so like, I want to work, get a job, like, so.
Are you like interviewing already for?
Yes.
Or, oh, nice.
Yeah, I have. And actually, I had before Collab Lab, I've done interviews. So, but this has definitely helped, like, because I was kind of just, I felt like I was just diving into things, and it has been a progression. So yeah, I did have an interview a week and a half ago, and I'm in a process now where I have a take-home assignment, and so yeah, I mean, I'm just, I don't know. I feel like I'm doing so much, but I guess I don't know if there's ever a point when you're ready. So, but yeah, that's kind
It's
of
great to hear.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
It is exciting, actually. So, yeah, that's on my end. So,
thanks for sharing.
Sure, thank you. We might want to grow up and be Nabil, one day. So.
Are there any
Bill,
pieces?
did you do something this week? I feel like
yeah, I was like, what am I getting called out for?
No. I think in a good way.
Very sweet. It was.
Yeah. I mean, because you know, with your design background and you, I think out of the us collectively, you have that, even though you're not software engineer as a title, but you work in this space now. Like, you're really connected to the people. So that we kind of want to be involved with professionally, even though Michael and Alejandro, but on a day-to-day, like your tomorrow, your Monday is a professional space in the tech industry. So
are there any things that we didn't quite get to, or that you didn't quite to dig deeper into with this particular app build that you were interested, like things like testing, or was there a certain functionality that you wanted to make more robust that you didn't quite get to? Because we could talk about that and kind of get ideas about how to like get it rolling so that you could make issues in this GitHub repo, and if you wanted to, even after Collab Lab's over, start implementing those things and continue building on it.
I think for me, maybe I think I've seen it, you know, with us collectively, is that working with I think just databases in general, we've kind of, it's felt like a kind of getting over a wall or going through it, you know, like we're coding, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this Firebase thing, like how are we gonna do that? Like it always seems like a stumbling block. So I think maybe digging more into that even after Collab Lab is definitely something, because it's like, yeah, every time we're doing something where it's like, yeah, we're trying to navigate it, and it feels very tricky, and we're just like, oh, got that done, you know, like can't believe I didn't know how we did that. So yeah,
Yeah, that's a good one. There are like so many pieces to that puzzle. It's like database structures to begin with, like at the highest level, and how to best organize those, all the way down to like dealing with Firebase that has its own like intense series of learning materials because it can be so robust, to, you know, like communicating through APIs with other, you know, packages or whatever it might be. So there's like so many angles I feel like you could take to like dig and learn more there. Any high level thoughts on like on that in general, Ale or Michael? Like thoughts on those tools, thoughts on database structures, or interacting with like Firebase, for example?
With Firebase, it's kind of like a unique situation where you have this like interesting JavaScript API on top of like a NoSQL database. Unless you're using Firebase like specifically in a professional setting, I feel like the UI portion translates to certain things, and then like the database stuff translates to different things, and then like using them together, it's like its own unique monster. So yeah, I guess I would try branching out to more database types, either SQL or Mongo. I know maybe this is not answering your question, Stacey. You asked specifically about Firebase, and now I'm branching
Not
off here.
necessarily. Like database stuff is great too. Just in general, like how could they learn more? What would be a good next step? Kind of like you're going to. What are your thoughts on it in general? So you're answering the question, just sharing what you know.
Yes.
I think the most learnings I had through working with databases was seeing working examples that other people built, and like picking them apart and putting them back together. So if you could go out and look for, it's harder, like with open source code, you can find it and run it locally, but with databases, you don't always get like API keys. So there's a challenge there. But Stacey's voice, Andrew's head. But that's something I would try to seek out. I think bigger projects with other database types and see how people do that. Otherwise, sticking with Firebase, I would keep trying to solve new, interesting things. Generally, you don't get it right the first time, so you just keep taking stabs at it and tweaking it as you go. And the database management portion of Firebase will translate over to other tools down the road. But just keep building with it, I guess. That was a really good way of saying that.
Adding on to the original question of like what else could be done, I think in the very beginning, if the program started with looking like the zoom out, there's basically a zoom out level of like, this is our problem space, this is the app that we're trying to create, like even something like flowcharts, those type of things that really help you like, oh, this is the whole story of what we're doing. and these are going to be our individual parts. Basically, this is the journey. We're each going to be taking parts of this like path as we like get to the end. That high level architecture, even I think I mentioned like on the React documentation, it asks you to go through a very specific way of like breaking down the UI into components, finding out the stateful parts, learning the relationship, connecting with just that general breakdown. And it might actually be helpful for us to like segregate out the UI piece of it, where we're not working, so we're not making too many decisions on the UI piece of it, and that way we can focus on the kind of the breakdown of the actual pieces. If we're looking to free up time. So like I know like today, like this week has some UI components, which is like very nice, and it also makes the project feel like they're on their own. But I can imagine if you had to swap that out with like a blog post of you breaking down like how you approach this thing from a high level, would probably mean more in an interview.
Oh, sure.
I love that. That's great feedback.
You bring up a good point there, because in a real world setting, I think it depends on where you work, but a mature engineering organization is going to have that documentation in place before you start writing the first lines of code. Generally, you can hash out and solve most of the problems you're going to run into before you write your first line of code. And I think maybe younger or smaller teams, or younger companies will just kind of have an idea and just run and gun with it. So I think as Collab Lab matures, like having more documentation and stuff like that to guide everyone to go in the right direction makes a lot of sense. And then that sets all of you up better down the road to have all that, like, so you can pull it out in an interview or something like that and talk through it. So I really appreciate that feedback. I think that's really important for us to address.
That was totally great. We'll go over more of that too, like in the final retro, to see like what like high level things, or I guess nitty gritty things we could do to like make it more beneficial for you and your path forward. Any other, like if you think about the code that you have in place right now, are there any pieces, even like higher level theory pieces, that don't quite make sense or that you would like a more thorough explanation on?
I'm sticking with I'm Firebase. That is my sticking point for me.
Like, would it be helpful to take a closer look at like how exactly data is getting from our app into Firebase?
Yeah, for me.
Or something?
Yeah. I think
Michael or Alejandro, do you want to take a stab at just like picking an example of like maybe starting in the add item and like walking through all the way to Firebase and talking about how those connect a little bit or something? Would that be helpful at all?
So
I'm thinking like, so you know how like, I don't know what's going on in the app right now because I haven't been in the code, but like, you know, for example, there's like the with Firestore higher order component. Like, what is a higher order component? What does it provide you with? Why would you use that versus a standard import? You know, things like that.
So right now I'm struggling. This is kind of going back to what I said before, that Firebase in its entirety, how we're using it, I think we obfuscate a lot of the complexities. I think if you're using a more traditional backend like SQL or GraphQL or something, it's easy to take apart and say like, we make a REST like post request or whatever, and then this layer receives it and processes some data and then puts it in the database and blah blah blah. Like there's like a clear line of like you can follow the code, more or less follow the breadcrumbs, but with Firebase there's a lot of magic that I know ultimately what's going on, but you kind of just put like a box around it and just treat it as like this mystery box. So it's harder for us to like pull it apart and talk about the different pieces and then have that translate to something else.
How about this?
Well, I think
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Steve. Yeah, I think also too that maybe it doesn't have to happen right now within the span of this hour, that, you know, it can be something a bit more continuous, because, you know, I'm going to be around with, you know, I'll still be in the Slack even, you know, and you know, you guys will be around. I see you guys. So yeah, I think it's a good, you know, it's a good point. But yeah, maybe it doesn't have to happen right now.
Well, yeah, I just want to make sure we're like getting to use Q&A time to actually learn something, to dig deeper on some kind of technical topic. Unless you guys just want to like close the meeting out early and jump into breakout rooms. But would it be helpful to, like, since we're talking about, you know, communicating through APIs and stuff, if we just had like a high level discussion of how that works? Like, Michael, you can pull up your screen and just draw boxes or something and explain it, or are you all super familiar with that? Is that something that's interesting to you? Maybe. If not, we can just like do breakouts, like, and go over next week's issues too. That's fine as well.
I did have a question more based on our structure rather than
a
deeper dive. So I always had a hard time figuring out where, so as the app gets longer and longer, it's like sometimes it's been said to break things out into smaller component files. But I sometimes get confused of like where data is coming from and how to pass it, especially with functional components, because if you have like a class component, you have all of your variables kind of stored up top and you're changing state. With functional components, I found myself getting a little bit more lost of where everything was coming from or how to access things properly. Is that where something like state management as an external thing like Redux comes into play to help mitigate where all of these pieces are coming from? Or I know that our app isn't that complex yet, but or would it be just better to break it down more into component files? And then I guess I don't know exactly what I'm asking, but is there a tip for figuring out like how data flows and where it's coming from?
When you say data, are you talking about like the different components? Like we have like maybe this component in this folder and this component in this folder, and how it all structures up in the end, like how it gets all wired up? Or are you talking data like more database side?
You're muted.
Our list function is pretty long.
Yeah.
And so we're pulling stuff from the database as props and then passing those props through different functional components. And sometimes I would pull stuff and get undefined, but then other times I wouldn't, and I wasn't quite understanding exactly. I was like, am I not pulling this correctly? Or I don't know. Or wasn't able to get items out of the database even if I'm pulling props item ID or something like that.
This is kind of like what I was talking about when I was like, can we like just walk through the code and say like, here's add item and here's where it's coming from and going to, not necessarily to uncover magic from like Firestore's methods, but more to be like, here's like where this like data from the database is coming into the app and here's how it's getting passed around and here's ways we can make that more efficient. Or, you know, things like she's saying, like pulling, I hear you, buddy, pulling things from props and stuff, and like how we can make that like super efficient. Like if we're prop drilling so much that we should maybe like have context somewhere instead or something.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Does that work for what you were asking too, Devon?
Yeah, it does. No, I think, yeah, that's exactly what, yeah, definitely.
Like, cause I totally feel you, like, it seems like sometimes that stuff can get lost like between components. You don't know where it's going or like how to get it and how to make sure like you're passing your props around successfully.
I'm trying to narrow down. I've heard a lot of different things here. I guess different symptoms of different problems. So I'm trying to narrow it down. So do we want to just talk about because there's like code organization. I think that's one thing. So it makes sense, like you know where to go look for something. And then once you have an organized code base, then being able to follow the code from like top to bottom, the React tree. And then there's the issue of, okay, I'm interacting with the database somehow. How do I like debug this well and understand the inputs and outputs? So there's like different things here.
I think what mostly everybody's kind of getting at is like props. You know, like once you have that data, like how to send it to and from different components.
I think it's kind of a bit both, because I just typed in the chat, but yeah, I think code organization, I think I don't know, I guess maybe that's a whole other thing, but it definitely would help as well, because I think with us kind of where we're teaming up and we're working on our, you know, current issue, and then you go back and you're like, wait a minute, okay, what? And then, you know, then you're dealing with functional components, and so it's like it can get a bit lost where you're losing it as far as the organization, and how everything is moving with the data.
I wondered if, yeah, as Michael said, we have a bunch of things like a bunch of topics, right? That's how I'm seeing this.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if this could be simplified by like not using Firebase, or not using like the abstraction, which is Firestore, you know, like, for example, in our like regular application that is using like an API, like GraphQL or REST, you have like clear boundaries between like, this is the data layer that is taking care of getting the data. This is the next layer that is taking care of like formatting the data so it gets to the components. And then we have the other layer, which is the components, right? But here with Firestore, it's like everything is there. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. Maybe if we had something different, that could be like easy to like point, like split the different like layers of the app. Maybe I myself have problems with Firebase. It's like, sometimes it's like it's magic. No, for real, like it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So
no, I think also
it's like fine.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Bad.
What I'm writing in the chat here, and I'm only saying this because I've seen this with every single cohort so far, and like the idea of props can be really hard to like wrap your head around. But what I've seen a lot is they're like people like Collab Labbies, whatever you want to call them, are like, we're getting the list. I know we have the list, but I can't get the data that I need in this component way over here. Why not? You know, and it's like Megan was saying, like, you're trying to be like, props dot this, props dot that, and I can't quite figure out why I can't get things out of props. So I feel like a discussion on like props, like how to pass them around, is beneficial.
Do you think that might be from like being able to like debug code, like going like the ways that I've been able to figure out what's going on with like props has been literally for me just going in and using the debugger and then like try this, oh, like this is where it is, and then like working, and so then I can isolate at least a little bit here.
I think that's a good like kind of way to tinker around, but I think if you can take a step back up and understand like at a higher level like how props are working and what they should look like, can give you like more direction, so that even if you do have to go into debug, you can do it more efficiently.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I was going to share my screen here. This is kind of hitting on a little bit of this. I know I feel like everyone has kind of something they want to get out of this. Let me just make sure this works before okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you how I debug apps, especially apps that maybe, imagine we just got a new person on our team tomorrow and they had to jump in here. Like y'all have seen it built from the ground up, but somebody new might have to figure out where like all the like different connections are. How does this page load this page and this component and these props, right? So understanding the lay of the land, this is what I do. So here I have my browser, and I have this open locally, but I have this React DevTools Chrome extension. And I think this is really important for any kind of like medium. Once you get out of like a to-do app type territory, you want to have tools to help you debug better. So like, you know, y'all have seen this element, and you can go like network, and there's all these different tabs. Some of these I don't think I've ever touched before, but the React DevTools adds a new tab here, and it gives you a hierarchy of your component from the ground up, and it even highlights when your mouse is over one of these. So we have the sign-in component, and I'm not sharing my full screen, but I'm just gonna search real quick, like sign in. So we have the function sign in app.js. So if you go to app.js, you'll see sign in. So that's what this is here, the sign in component. So if I like go to create shopping list, you'll see that this changed to list view. So I think that's the get list component is the list view. So once I'm like, this is how I kind of understand apps from a high level, is I click around and look at the DOM here, or the virtual DOM. So to make things even easier to understand, you can see the props that are passed around. So we have like these really like high level things that we don't really touch much, but once we get into our main component, you can see, for one, you can see what component is rendering it. So it helps you connect the dots in your brain. But you can also see the props that are passed around. So this one, maybe not the best, but here, great. So when I go to item form, let's see, I guess we're not really passing a lot of props around because I'm not seeing many props here. So item.
Hey, that state I noticed that when I started using the React hooks, it started changing them to that state. It was like use state, use under hooks, but it changed it from props, or no, never mind. The props are above.
Yeah, the props are
happening?
apparent in the hook.
Oh, okay.
So hooks have their own section because they're handled a little differently.
Got it.
Here we have the list. I just added this item test, and then the highlighting here is getting to me. Okay, so we have a list with one item in it, and I put my mouse over item row. So this component is in the add item. No, item row is in get list. So if you look at that item row component, it has props, and we get item out of props. So we can actually see what the item is right here and see all the values. And I don't have to like put a debugger in anywhere. I just have to get to the page loaded in a certain way, and I can dissect all of this way. And this helps me, like I haven't written any code for this project, but I can tell you more or less how everything works just by looking at this. I can see the props being passed in, and I can make this kind of assumption that the full list is probably, it has like a data variable in here in the props, which has that's coming probably from Firestore collection with the list of things. And then we're iterating over that data and passing in each individual thing in the array into the item row. And then this is what that item is. It has this ID with this name. Here's all the other variables. So yeah, whenever I'm developing, even when I'm looking and understanding an app, I use this, but when I'm developing, I keep my tooling open like this so I can understand like what's going on as I make changes in the code. And hopefully every time I make a change and reload the website, everything still makes sense. And if something's not right, then I go in here and like, okay, why is it undefined? Well, okay, clearly the item is undefined. Then I will go a step up and see like, okay, was it in the state correctly? No. This, I think, yeah. So if I type test in here, I see this state updates to test. So this state here is what we're using to hold the filter query. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that this answers some of your questions. I'm trying to do it like off the cuff here, but does this help, or is this not what you were looking for at all?
It definitely helps me some. I know Nabil walked through some of how he uses debugger. That was a very similar way that was super helpful. I think it, like I said, having open while you're coding seemed, I don't know why I didn't think of that before. But yeah, it's like I would get something undefined and I was like, I swear I passed these props through, but where is it coming from, you know?
Yeah. I think that part of the job of like a software engineer is being able to like use your tools to help you debug stuff. I think we have an interesting thing where like we created like one component, then we created the second component, and we start creating component after component, and we don't have an organized way of keeping them all in order. It's like every time we buy a new piece of furniture, we just like put it in the living room, and eventually our living room's too full of stuff. We need to like kind of assess that, okay, now we have too much furniture in the living room.
Bravo. That was good. That's a good metaphor.
So we need to figure out, okay, what makes sense? Should the couch actually be against this wall? We put it in there because when we first moved the furniture in, we just put it there and then it's there forever. Or should we put it up against this wall because we'll get a better view of the TV? So I think our team, if we were to continue going on, would need to have like a meeting where we say, what makes sense now? We have, which components do we have? And should we move this one out of this file? And then we get this organization of components. So that will help your mental model of how the app is structured. And then from there, sometimes it's easier to connect the dots of like, well, why is this prop undefined? Well, the list view passes it to the item row. So it's probably coming from list view, and then you can go there and debug some more. Without that mental model, then it's harder to navigate, I think, the code base. Like every time you run into an error, you're like, oh, this could be anywhere. That we have hundreds of lines of code now, right?
I love it. Great. Okay, so I hope that was helpful in a way. I'm realizing now that we definitely should, if we do this again, have it be a bit more like a little more pre-work to submit questions so that we can give like a good, thorough kind of lesson later down the line. Anyway, hopefully that gave you something. I think that like I was saying before, props in general are hard to understand, like especially when you're first getting started with React. So Michael, I love that you were like, start where you expect them and keep walking it back until you find them, kind of, because props are going to have what you give them. And I think that kind of gets lost where like, it's all kind of behind the scenes and it seems very magical, but if you didn't give it, then it's probably not going to have it unless you do have it wrapped in some kind of like hardware component or something that gives it access to it, right? So props are confusing. Thank you for the walkthrough, Michael. Love you. Okay, so let me share my screen real quick because we are coming into week 8. Share. Okay, see these? Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. I got a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Awesome. So it looks like they're all things that make the app look pretty, right? And so I put in Slack our pairing, no, not project, pairing pairs. But honestly, it might be best to just work as a full team on these. Because you're gonna like want a cohesive style, and there's gonna be a lot of things that like play together here. So I want to get your thoughts. What do you think? Would you rather just work as a full team of 4 where you can like mob a program on some of it and maybe break little bits and pieces out? Or do you want to stick to like, just taking like 1 or 2 of these and working in your pairs? What would be best for you all? What we've seen, like what I've seen in the past that I love in the last week that I thought worked really well is like when a cohort gets together as 4 and like decides on a style, and like in advance before your group session, you can like send in ideas and like vote on ideas or whatever. And then whenever you have decided on some kind of like common theme or, library or something that you're going to leverage, you can meet up and kind of like break it into smaller pieces. Like, okay, you're going to style, this specific form or whatever it might be, and break it up like that so that you each have pieces that you can manage and play with, but a higher level idea that you're all working towards. But if you want to just work in pairs and split these tickets out exactly, that's fine too. What do you think?
I like the mob.
Yeah.
I like what you said.
Let's mob it.
Okay.
Me
Then
too,
in
because I
that
already
case-
broke some things.
Perfect. Okay, well then we will just stick with that. Let's see. I think we can probably, this one looks like it's already done, right? The shopping list screen.
Yeah. That would be.
Move this over. Okay, so with these other ones, I'll just go ahead and move them all over here because I think that I think the hardest part is like coming up with a cohesive idea that you can all work towards. And then once you get that, it all will kind of like fall into place and you can make it look pretty quicker. You know what I mean? So I'm just gonna move them over here for now and let y'all kind of mob on that and organize the work yourselves. Michael, Ale, any thoughts on that? It's just styling at this point. So it all kind of goes together.
I think
It's fine for me.
I think if there's 4 tickets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if each person takes 1 ticket to be the champion of that, I think you can work on any of the 4 tickets, but I think each person should champion 1 ticket and make sure that like at the end of the week, it's in a good spot. So if that means you do the work yourself or you ask for feedback from everyone else to get the ideas out of them, but each champion should like create conversations in Slack to say like, hey, what do we think this should look
It could
like?
also, like, what do you think about this? It could also be useful to work off the same branch, but different pieces of the puzzle, you know? So like, if you do decide on like using, I don't know, material UI or something, you might already be, I'm not sure. But like, you just have to add that once and you can all be, you know, kind of looking at each other's work on the same branch to replicate it.
I
Because
think
Nabil might make a, okay, go ahead.
I'd say from experience, I already messed that up because we started and we're like, oh gosh, well, Bootstrap's already installed. Let's try Material UI. And then I was like, oh, this is way too complicated. And then I took it out. So yeah, I guess we should have made those decisions maybe a little bit earlier. But I think we haven't gone too far down the rabbit hole that we could all agree on.
Nabil is itching. He's like, "Come on, this is my thing." I can't.
I'm here to not be the designer.
Oh.
So, okay, this is what I would recommend. Pop into Slack, start a thread that's called like week 8 or something. I'll delete those other ones that I posted. And just start talking about like high level. Do you want to use material? Do you want to use Bootstrap? What do you want to use? Send in ideas about what you think it could look like, agree on like, you know, color palettes and stuff like that. And then once you kind of get some of that information collected, then have like a group meeting where you can really like refine the idea. Good.
Just maybe just one thing I would say is like maybe we should just like take what Megan and Tansy already started last week and just like amplify that.
For sure.
And like push forward with that. A lot of decisions are probably already made there. And then we can make some system level tweaks on that.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Sounds good. Sounds like you guys got a good idea. Okay. Well, in that case, happy styling.
I like the idea of one
you.
branch, specifically because we'll have 4 lines of work going on and the conflicts will be kind of troublesome.
Yeah.
We have 4 different branches all merging at the same time. So I like the idea of one branch if you want to do that.
Awesome. All right. Well, in that case, I'll let you all coordinate in Slack and we're here if you need help. Good.
Thanks, everybody.
Right. Amazing work, team.
It's the last week, right?
The last week. It is
Yeah,
the last week.
Got it.
Yeah,
Y'all have done
that's really
so
cool.
good.
It's
All right.
been great.
Yes.
Oh, Michael, there.
Right.
All
Bye,
right.
everybody.
We'll be
All right,
around. See
guys.
y'all.
Thanks.
All right.